Alrighty. Happy Tuesday. Oops. Welcome into another AI Academy session. I hope you're all doing well. Um, we have a pretty exciting and pretty jam-packed AI Academy session today. Um, but first, before we get into the actual content, I do want to do a little plug for Knowledge, which is coming up in about 30 days or so. It's on May 5th to 7th. So if you haven't registered, do register. If you show up, you'll probably find myself, a bunch of members on my team who have been on AI Academies before, walking around the floor. So we'd love to see you there. And for AI Academy today, we have a really special one where we are presenting how to use document intelligence outputs within a custom skill created with the Analysis Skill Kit. So I know we've done a few sessions like this in the past, but we've kind of gone into Skill Kit, brought in extra data. But this one is really neat. It's really fun use case. So I hope you're excited. Now, because we are product managers here, we might make some forward-looking statements. So we do always have to say, safe harbor. Don't make any purchasing decisions based on those forward-looking statements. Um, and then lastly, some housekeeping. We have saved time at the end for Q&A. It might be a little bit tight, but we have time afterwards. So if you're able to stay beyond the half an hour, we're happy to answer your questions. Please use the Q&A button to ask questions. Let's just make sure that we actually go ahead and answer every single one of the questions that come through, whereas in chat, it can get lost. This presentation will be recorded and shared on the YouTube ServiceNow community playlist. So do take a look there. We do have past sessions uploaded there as well. And then lastly, after the event, you will be prompted to fill out a short survey. We do look at your feedback every week and try to make changes, and just we want to make what you guys want to see. So please feel free to fill out that survey. Now, for today, are we one of your presenters? I'm Eliza Orchard. I'm an outbound product manager here at ServiceNow who focuses kind of on custom generative AI solutions. So a lot of skill kit. And we also have Justin, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hey
Hey
team,
team,
Justin
Justin
Wilman
Woman
here.
here.
I am a outbound product manager covering multimodal services and experiences here at ServiceNow. So you may have seen me a few weeks ago with AI voice agents. I'm here to help with the Doc Intel side of this Analysis Skill Kit Academy. So good morning, everyone.
Awesome. Sweet. And also good morning. Everyone here seems to be Central or East Coast chiming in on chat. I'm in Seattle. We need some West Coast representation. Anywho, so one last housekeeping thing to note is actually that live on ServiceNow the branding has changed to ServiceNow Exchange. So if you see that pop up, we have a ton of different events, not just AI Academy. So please feel free to scan that QR code and find out more. Awesome. And I see the chats exploding. I appreciate everyone chiming in where they're based out of. We've even got some people in Europe, which is incredible. Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I've spent a lot of time in Louisiana, so glad to have you here. Hope it's warmer than Seattle right now. Anywho, so we'll be going briefly through some slides and then we'll go straight into a demo and then again, same time at the end for Q&A. So you guys, if you have been joining AI Academy for a while, you've probably seen this slide, but I just like to walk through how do custom skills within ServiceNow work. So custom skills, these are skills that you go out and create within Analysis Skill Kit. And the first step, you collect data from anywhere. This can be a workflow. This can be a system event. This can be, someone typing something in. You collect the data that you want to do something with. You combine it with a prompt, which is those instructions telling the LLM what you want to do with that data. You send that data off to the LLM of your choice. Now we've got the top four are all ones that are available for you out of the box. You don't need to do any of the licensing. We manage it. Or you can bring your own key and kind of use any We've got specific spokes for the ones listed under Bring Your Own Key. Or if you're fancy, you've got your own custom LLM, you can also do true Bring Your Own. Once the LLM has kind of chewed through that data, chewed through the prompt, it will return a response for you to either just display or to kind of further the processing. So today, what we're focusing on is that integration to pull in data from a document. In our case, it will be a PDF. And Justin will walk you through kind of what that looks like architecturally.
Yeah, so within Now Assist and Doc Intel, we have kind of two main components. We have a skill, and then we have some agentic services that make up an out-of-box agent known as the Doc and Visual Insights agent. For today, we'll be focusing more on the left-hand side of the screen within the extraction skill. The difference between these two is mainly the fact that skills are predefined, meaning we know ahead of time what fields we're looking for or questions we want to answer, whereas the agentic services are more ad hoc based. Because the skill is predefined, it's also usually higher in accuracy. So over time, if we're doing something repetitively, like a custom skill that we're going to call, then we'll want to lean on probably the extraction skill. And we can extract everything from a single field to full tables of data within your document. We extract however many rows happen to be in that table. We don't need to know that ahead of time. And as well as answers to predefined questions. So you do have the ability within Skill Kit to use the summarization and the ad hoc Q&A tool, which is more of an ad hoc service. But for today's example, we are going to focus on the left of the screen with the extraction skill.
Awesome. And so moving on to the actual use case we will be building today. So RMAs, return merchandise authorizations. I only heard about these last week, but this felt like a really good fit for this particular use case that I wanted to show off. So RMAs, they are essentially requests from a particular customer saying like, hey, this inventory that you sent us, we want to return it for, let's say it might be broken, it might not be right, the color might be wrong, anything like that. They send one of these RMA requests along with a range of details about the items that they want to return, the reasons why. Typically, this falls under the hardware asset management kind of area within ServiceNow. And so the flow that we're going to be building is we have an RMA request arriving via email. We then create a custom skill that takes in the contents of that RMA request PDF, specific information. We review it against the RMA approval policy knowledge article that we conveniently have. And then we also have a prompt guiding the LLM what to do with these two data sources, i.e., we'll be creating a JSON object that contains all the information of all the assets, the vendor, all that stuff that it was able to pull out of the record, and then says also, based upon the policy knowledge article, should we approve it, auto approve it, or does this require a manual review to see if it fits in within our refund policy? So again, the output from the LLM will be building a quick flow to actually go through and process that JSON object and create the records where they need to be created. So let's take a look. So welcome into Analysis, to the ServiceNow instance. The first thing that I want to show briefly is just the plugins that you guys will need to build this. First of all, you do need a valid analysis license. Also, someone said that there's an echo. I do have another microphone I can attach if it's bad, but that might take a second. So just let me know if we're good. Okay, awesome. Thank you all. So with the plugins, you do need a valid analysis license. And for the document intelligence piece, you need to have analysis and document intelligence. This comes with the analysis for platform plugin as well. There's a kind of dependency there. So you can install that or kind of just install it separately. And that is also in addition to analysis skill kit itself. So those two plugins are kind of key here. And so if we go into skill kits, we'll go ahead and create a skill. Very convenient. And so our skill name is just going to be, well, we'll just call it RMA Request Authorizer. And the description, now for those who are familiar with Analysis Skill Kit, typically we want to put in a description just because it auto generates an initial skeleton prompt for us. So I tend to prefer using that. You then choose your provider, and today we'll be using one of the ServiceNow kind of OEMs models, that integrated model that I showed on the slide earlier. So we're just going to use AWS Claude. And then configure security controls. So user access, we're just going to let any authenticated user use a skill. And then the second field is basically if someone triggers a skill, what roles can actually be inherited by the skill. So in the FAQ, we address this a little bit more in detail. We don't have time to really talk about this today, but just know that you have options here in terms of limiting what a skill can actually access. We click next. And because we entered a description, we're going to say, hey, I want to use an AI generated prompt from that description. You can see just based on it, it was able to pull together a pretty strong prompt that follows best practices, such as having different titles, the role, the context, the instructions. So we're going to use that. And then skip straight into the prompt editor. Awesome. So welcome into the custom skill. So what we are doing first is, if you remember, is part of the that our RMA request are actually going to be coming in via email. So just to show you what that looks like within an instance, I just sent one in earlier yesterday, where I just had an email come in saying, so RMA report test, and then the PDF is attached to this record. So we want to add this as an input to our skill. So we want to add a skill input of type record from the sys email table. And we are going to choose a test record, and this just makes it easier for us to test because it will automatically be populated every time. And we're going to pass in that email that I just showed you all. And we have our skill input. And then we can just make sure that the prompt is saved. And if we look through the prompt, we can see that it asks for the actual RMA request input to be provided. Now, that RMA request, if I bring up the PDF, this is what that looks like. So we're going to be using Doc Intelligence to actually pull out specific information that we need to kind of align with the instructions listed out here. So to do so, I'll actually hand over to Justin to create that use case.
One moment here.
No.
All right, and for this bit, we're actually going to hop into Now Assist Admin. So you can get there from your admin filters here. When you get to Now Assist Admin, we're going to hop over to the Now Assist Skills and find the section for Platform. Because there are several platform skills, easiest way is actually going to be to quickly do a keyword search for doc. This loads. You'll find a couple different skills. This is our legacy skill, so just calling that out because we do want to use the one titled extract information from documents. We've actually merged two skills together, so you no longer have to have a separate skill for Q&A and one for field extraction. So let's hop in here and edit this skill. I'll go ahead and hop over. Once we go into the skill, We will choose new use case. And what we're doing is we're creating that execution sequence or that execution record, right? That configuration settings. So let's pull up a use case. Go with RMA test. Normally, if you're using Now Assistant Doc and Tell for other use cases, you would define a target table where we're actually going to extract the info. Because of the way that we're using this custom skill, we're actually pulling the information back into the skill itself. So we'll leave the target table empty. If you're using Chinese or Japanese, you can select the other model. Otherwise, leave it defaulted to Latin model. We have an option here to choose our LLM provider. There are many different. I always like to go with GPT Large because I've trained on it most often. There is a selection for image mode. What that means is if we're processing, let's say we have a use case we set up where we're going to process through passports or driver's licenses or images of boxes that have been delivered and whether or not they're still in good shape, we would choose image mode to toggle to multimodal. It does bring our page count way down, so only use it when you are truly using images, but that'll allow for the best multimodal experience. We don't need that in this case. I'll save and continue here. And this is where we're going to actually add in the fields, definitions, or the prompts, if you will. Interesting experience here. Hold on one moment. See if it gets any better here. Okay, so I'm going to show you just briefly what we're going to do for fields, for tables, and for Q&A, and then we'll hop over to a use case that's already been populated. So we'll start by giving it a name. In this case, on our RMA record, one of the things we're looking for is a PO number. We're going to drop in some details. And if you're not sure which details you want to add in here for your side of the prompt, there's actually field assistants that'll walk you through. In other words, give it a name, give us some context, and please provide some examples, comma separated. And here's an example of what that all looks like, or a couple of them. And so if we get used to defining the fields or the questions that we're looking for in this manner, we're going to have a lot less cycles of coming back and editing these prompts when we test. Our field type for PO number, because it's alphanumeric, is going to be left as text. And again, if we had entered a target table, this is where we'd do the field mapping. We're not going to do that today because of the way that we're using our skill. And there's a couple toggles down here at the bottom. If we require a field for extraction, that's mainly when you want to turn this on to full automation in its normal use case, that we can deem something as extra important or critical. For this case, I will just save and add another field. And I apologize here. I don't know why it's listing it this way. We're going to hop and add a question. Sorry, a table here. Our table is actually looking for a table within your document, visually inspecting the document and parsing for a table. So we are going to add a table called items requested for return. We're going to add in some details about what that table is for. So this is the table critical details for the different items that are being returned, and then I actually define out some of the columns data that I'm looking for within that table structure. Eliza can show you that in just a moment. I'll see if I can open this larger. And again, we don't have a target table. We don't need this as required, so we're just going to add a few quick columns. The type of columns we'll be looking for is stuff like product description, product SKU, and then let's say quantity returned. Oops. And we can change that to an integer. So there's a few different field types, as you'll see, text, date, and several types of numbers you can use. And go on and save that. And what we start to build here is a set of information that we're going to be looking at for extraction. When we come over to test outputs, I'll show you this on the one that we've actually created, but this is where you can actually test against your document. So we can pull in our RMA record here, run it, For the sake of time, I'm going to show you what that actually looks like after it ran, but we'll save and continue. And this is where we actually add the out-of-box integrations. And let me show you that on the built-out use case as well. But we would save and activate from this point. So if we hop into our use case that's been fully defined, you notice that it's active. You'll notice that we have several fields here that can run. We also have, or that it's searching for, whether it's fields or it's questions and the data that it's looking for. But we also have our table structure, items requested for return, and we have each of the columns that we defined. So anytime it finds a table, it's going to look for these columns of data, no matter how many other columns exist, and pull these out row by row. Very briefly, let me show you what that actually looks like. So this is our test panel. You'll actually see the document itself. And then here on the right, as we scroll down, you'll see that it's found the answers and it's bounded the boxes around where it's found the answers within the document. So it's always a good idea to come in here and test. And then it'll even give on our questions, if we ask for something a little more ambiguous, it'll give us the full explanation of what it found when it was looking for that. And then lastly, if I come down here all the way to the bottom, if I open up my table, I can see line by line and row by row. So I'm sorry, it squeezes this data together a little bit, but you'll see that it plucked out each of the rows and the columns of data that we were searching for. And with that, I think we're going to hop back over to the skill and see how now that the document extraction is executed, what we're going to do with that data.
Exactly. So thank you so much, Justin. So that is our use case that's being set up that we're going to be using to pull in data from that email, that PDF that's attached to the email. So looking at the skill, once that use case has been published, we click on Add Tools. We click on the little plus icon, and we want to add a tool node. And unfortunately, I'm using Firefox, so we are going to add in our RMA data extractor tool. Never mind the spelling. And the action that we want to take is just, we want to extract information from that. And the use case is one that Justin just created. So we're going to be using the RMA extractor version 1, which is that complete one that he created. So we click continue. And then we're asked to provide a source record ID. So this is where we essentially reference the email record. So we want to pull in the sysid of that email record from the skill input. And then the source table is just which table is this record on? So which is this email. And we had a question about filtering attachments. We do have a couple of options here. We can say, okay, I only want to pull in a PDF record or file sizes of less than a certain size. So you do have some options there. And then you click continue. And then up here is just all the outputs from the tool, such as the invoice number, the customer name, the question that was created. And you just click continue. Tool conditions, this is just if you want the tool to run or not. You can write a script. And then lastly, we just review all that information that we just had and click Add Tool. So we have that document intelligence added in. And if we go back to the prompt, we actually just replace what's in those brackets was auto-generated. We click on Inputs and Tools, and we want to have the response from the doc and tell field populated in here. However, if you remember in the use case, we also have a policy guide. And this is hosted just as a KB article within the knowledge base. So we want to actually just do a search for that. So we're going to add another tool of type retriever. And this is essentially AI search. You'll notice some things such as get policy guide. It uses rag. And then the search query that we will use, I'm just going to search for the return merchandise authorization policy. We're just going to do the search as table base on the KB knowledge table. That's to here. There you go. And then all this other information, it's fine. We only want to have a small number of documents returned if it finds any of them. Search criteria, hybrid's fine. We do have a separate AI Academy, which we can link on kind of all what chunking and re-ranking means. I just tend to leave it as default and it works just fine. You do, however, have to choose an embedding model and the semantic indexes. We're speaking this today, but normally you can just choose a default and it works well. Again, the output of the search will just be a JSON object containing the knowledge article that is found. And then we can add a tool. And sorry, my instance is a little bit funny when adding a tool, which is why you see the box is so small and it shows that bottom part. So you will not have that experience. But anyway, so that's our policy guide. So again, we go back to our prompt and we need to add in the results here. So let's save and test our custom skill. And just as a reminder, we do want our output to be a JSON object, which again, having fun with my little instance, but we do want the output to be a JSON object that looks somewhat like this, where the approval status is determined by the custom skill looking at the policy record and the RMA request details to see if it's actually within policy to have this refund returned or not. We have all the information pulled out from the request, be it, the vendor name, the customer name itself, the PO number, invoice number, each of the individual assets that were outlined on that document. So it really does help in your prompting if you do have an example output, just for structuring reasons. And boom. So very conveniently, as soon as I finish my sentence, it has finished loading. And this is the response we get back from the custom skill, which looks very, very similar because that is actually what was on that PDF. If I bring it up, no, just bring this over to the side. Close these other ones. We've got, the industrial drill bit kits and the nitrochemical resistant gloves. So we've got all the details just outlined in a JSON object for us to do something with. Now, good thing to always remember, if you want to verify, you can click on grounded prompt. This shows you what exactly was sent off to the LLM. Or if you want to see the output of the tools themselves, you can click on tools and see, okay, did the AI search RAG retriever work? What data did you get back from Doc and Tell? So we can see exactly here what was returned. Now, one thing that you might have already noticed is that the response was truncated. This is because of the response token limit. So for us to fix that, we need to click on prompt settings and change the maximum response tokens to a number that can actually handle the response we want back from the LLM. So we are at time. I will spend 5 more minutes briefly walking you through the next step in this process, if you're curious, where we actually have a flow that goes through and processes that JSON object and turns it into actual records in the instance. So we've got deployment skill settings up here. This is just where we deploy it, and we want to have this run automatically as part of a flow. So we click save. Then we go back to our prompt and we want to make sure that it is finalized. So this just means it's locked down, we're happy with it. So we click on the lock icon. I guess it did, never mind. And we click publish. Sorry, I'm impatient. It's telling me off. Because my internet might be acting a little funny. Let me just try reloading. There we go. Finalize the prompt there. And you'll see it's locked down. And we click publish a skill and we choose which prompt we want to have published. That's the one that we have. And we need to make sure that is activated. So we go into Now sysadmin, either from that link there, or you can click on Now sysadmin here. It'll be under available, where you can see here, you just need to click activate skill and make sure this is toggled on for it to actually be available in flows. Activate. And now conveniently, we would have already built this out for you. So just to show you an idea of what this looks like. This is within Flow Designer Workflow Studio, where we have a flow where we've got a trigger, which is an inbound email, where you can filter on and say the subject only contains words RMA requests. Never mind that. And then what you want to do is have an action of type execute skill, where you find that workflow where you publish a custom skill to, and then you'll find your actual skill in that skill config field. So the name of our skill was RMA approver. So that's one that we selected. And then the email is that email record that triggered this. So you want to bring that in there, ideally. And then once that skill has been executed, well, the output of this action will be that JSON object that we just created within the skill. So we are going to actually pass that in to a flow action called generate RMA request records, where again, we pass in the data from that execute skill option. So we'll just be passing in that response there. And then boom, we have a flow action here, which is separate. And again, the action input, we just labeled as the RMA data. This is that JSON object that we got back from the skill that we passed in. And then I have a lovely script that basically just goes through and passes through that JSON object to see, okay, does that vendor exist in the system? If not, let's create it. Does an RMA request exist in the system? If not, again, let's create it. And then we go through and just take out all the information that we extracted from the document and essentially create records within an instance on those asset tables, on those vendor tables. And then lastly, we also have that step that the LM did to say, okay, do we want to automatically approve it or not? So the LM made that determination. If yes, then it's going to be an approval. The task itself is going to be approved. If not, we're going to send it off for manual review. So if I just refresh this page, because I needed to add in that last step. And sorry, team, I definitely got a bit ambitious with how much we could do today in the half an hour, but I appreciate all of you for sticking with it. Um, so what was that part that I wanted to bring in? So the trigger email, that's fine. My records response. Okay, so let's test this flow. So again, we're going to pass in the email record of RMA report test, which is that one we saw at the beginning. And it's processing. And we can actually perhaps have a sneak preview at the record table to see if it's created a new one yet. Okay, we're all happy. So looking at the execution flow, we can see, okay, this was the output from um, the skill itself. So it actually wasn't able to pull in the information directly from the RMA request. So that's that's a new one. That is fine. Um, but we can see that it still tried to kind of process that RMA request. It said like, okay, the approval status, it's been denied because it was an incomplete RMA request. It was missing um, the relevant information. So that's nice that we kind of like have a backup. It still tries to continue. We've got that redundancy, but something went wrong with actual processing of the document. So I'll give one more shot. Let me run this test one more time to see what the output is from the skill. We love live debugging. And also just run the test again. And while these are both loading, I'll answer some questions. Um, so the dialog box is the result of scaling, most likely, but I also am in a demo instance, so that's why you might have seen the extra inputs at the bottom. It is not typically like that. Typically, it is a lot cleaner. I can show you an example on the other one of these that I created as a test, but yeah, the dialog boxes generally look like this. So it's just because I'm on a demo instance that it got kind of messed up. So that's what those dialog boxes will look like. Um, why are we adding in a policy guide? So the policy guide, it's in our example, we pass in just an example policy guide to say, okay, should we automatically authorize these returns to be approved? If not, they might require manual review. So it's just an example here where we say, okay, these are valid return reasons, and if they're auto approval eligible. So that's why we added this in to the LM just to see, okay, should we approve this or not? Um, just briefly looking again. So, okay, so it works within the skill. So if we go back to the flow, we once again can take a look and see it's probably something I've configured wrong in here. No, okay. So on the second time, it worked. Unfortunately, it's very ugly to read. But this is a response we got back from the skill. And again, we can look to see like, okay, here's this asset description. Here's all the information. We extracted that from that PDF. And if we go into the next step, again, we see this is what was actually passed into that script that we then processed and kind of created all the records for. So if we go in and refresh the list, it's not happy with me today. So there's something wrong in my script, how this is actually handled. But you can see the intention there. I'll have to go and debug this. And I'll be posting this up as a lab guide later on, but with a working script. Um, okay, so some things that I want to point out. We do have articles on community if you want to learn more about different tools and deployment options, such as this one on community. I'll link that in the comments. And we also have an FAQ as well that just contains a lot of answers, a lot of questions on skill kits, also common troubleshooting things as well. But one important thing that might be good for you all to know is that we have the use case library, which does contain a bunch of lab guides, such as this one. I'll be posting this one later on. Just essentially a step-by-step walkthrough of how to build and deploy custom skills. So those are three really helpful links on community for SkillKit. And with that, I'll go through and keep answering any questions. Thank you all for staying on a little bit longer than typically. So let's take a look at the Q&A. There we go. Okay, so can you explain the fields one sees on the execute skill action? So actually, let me just go back into the instance. So within the execute skill action, so the action itself, this is just the name of the action that we're doing. Execute skill, this is what you search upon when you say, okay, add an action of type execute skill. And then each of the fields there, so the workflow product feature, if you had kind of eagle eyes, you can take a look at the skill deployment settings. And you'll see, okay, there's a workflow, product, and feature. They're just essentially categories where you can publish your skill into for easy finding, for like ease of discovery within Analysis Admin. But then within your flow, they just map to that exactly. So if you published it in employee, for example, this is how you just kind of break down which skill you want to choose. But since you publish it in other, you only have to select other and then, whatever skill you want to use in this instance. It will pay attention to the skill input that you have. So in our case, underneath dynamic inputs, it knew that this RMA approver skill wanted an email. So you can pass in an email directly. Or as I kind of showed before, you can just drag and drop from one of the data pills to say like, okay, when this inbound email comes in, we want to pass this into the custom skill. So that's kind of what those fields are. I keep using Q&A. There you go. So the question on AI Control Tower, AI Academy session. So likely in June or July, we also have AI Academy, a community post here where you can keep up with the schedule. And just in terms of what's coming up next, we tend to update it just kind of for one topic in advance. And then we also have all the links to the prior ones as well. So you can just keep an eye on there for when we are doing a presentation on AI Control Tower. Any questions on your side, Justin, that you want to answer? I think.
I saw it asked a couple times, what happens if we see a different RMA come across, or if we're doing invoices and the types are different? Um, we did design Now Assistant Doc and Tell to handle unstructured data. So one of the beauties of moving beyond machine learning models and into LLM processing or extraction of documents is the fact that we can handle unstructured data. So we're not looking physically at page 2 in the upper right-hand corner. If you remember right, with our prompts, we're simply defining what it is that we're looking for within the document in natural language, maybe with a couple of examples listed. And then by doing so, we can handle that, no matter the type. So if the RMA is completely flipped upside down and the table is at the very end and some of the other data is in the middle and maybe slightly different in naming, we'll still be able to pull that data out. So always good to run your test outputs just to make sure. I test across several different documents when building, just to ensure that my prompts account for the most common file types that I see. So will you have some adjustment maybe if you have wild variances? Yes, and you can come in and just update the field details that exist here and run another test against a new document that you see. I think the other thing I would say is that we don't hallucinate. So there's a backend prompt plus whatever you fill in under your field details, which is basically your prompt. There's a backend prompt that says if we can't find these details specifically within the document, return it as missing in document. Don't guess or hallucinate or come up with whatever that next best entry would be. So I would say those two things combined, it should give you plenty of ease when it comes to unstructured data, which we've seen several questions about. So if we receive an RMA from 50 different companies, but we want this same type of information pulled from them, then we can run single use case against those and we will get the predictions that we're looking for. Yes, you can extract images. I just saw that question come across. Image mode is best for that. So when we were creating our doc intel use case, there is a selection for image mode. It decreases your document's page limit from 200 pages down to about 10 or 20. But it does a very good job of extracting data from images. You can ask questions against those images, all of those types of things. Full multimodal capability. So Katie, I hope that answers your question. I think that was it, Eliza.
Awesome. Yeah, no. Thank you so much for all your questions and all your participation. We appreciate you guys joining. And yeah, we will be posting this recording up on YouTube if you want to go in over anything. But again, have a good rest of your day, everyone.